Hello, everybody. So, on today's topic, we're going to be talking about the Dunning-Kruger effect. Okay, you've probably heard this term circulating around social media, and the concept that resides with the Dunning-Kruger effect is very simple. Okay, and I'm going to be explaining it in this video. So, in order for us to understand what the Dunning-Kruger effect is, let's first try to map out a definition, okay? And a little bit of background with what the Dunning-Kruger effect is. So the Dunning-Kruger effect was basically founded by these two psychologists we call David Dunning and Justin Kruger. And these two psychologists basically had conducted a research that was published in 1999 that was called the following. It was called Unskilled and Unaware of It: How Difficulties in Recognizing One's Own Incompetence Led to Inflated Self-Assessments. And this was where the Dunning-Kruger effect was basically founded. Okay? And the premise for this research, what basically happened in this research in particular that they conducted, is that they had four groups of young people. They had four groups of young people, and they basically assessed them. They basically had sort of like a test. They gave them a test to see, to sort of quiz them about things related to humor, and etc. And what they found in this study, what they found in the conclusion of this study, is that the people, okay, the young people who were tested the pattern was they generally taught that they did great on the test that they were given, okay? But in reality, they actually did very poorly. But in actuality, these people actually did not do very well. And the researchers, they took note of this. And they basically came up with the conclusion that the less you know about something, the more confident you are that you know. And why is that? Okay? Let's try to decipher the reason. for why this sort of paradox happens in a lot of us. Okay? Apparently, the research says that let's try to draw an illustration that I saw earlier, okay? Let's try to draw a plane here. So we, on the y-axis, we have perceived confidence. And on the x-axis, we have competence, actual competence. And the reason for why this happens, why the Dunning-Kruger effect happens, according to the research, is basically because the more you know about, the less you, sorry about that, the less you know about any topic, the more confident you are. Okay? The less you know about a topic, the more confident you are that you know that topic, that you know everything there is to learn. And why? Because you are not competent enough to know what you do not know. And that sounds very simple, right? Okay? There was a quote that I heard from a philosopher, from a Greek philosopher named Socrates, wherein he said, I know I am intelligent. Because I know that I know nothing. And that quote directly relates to the Dunning-Kruger effect. So if you could imagine this illustration, you know, let's say you're on top of the very peak of this slope. You're very confident, but you have less competence than you would than as opposed to what you perceive you do. And people call this slope the peak of Mount Stupid. Yes, they actually called this. I'm not making this up. When you are very confident that you know a subject, it is more likely that you do not know a lot about the subject than it is that you do know a lot about a subject. Because according to this illustration, okay, the more competent you are in any topic or subject whatsoever, the more you start to doubt yourself. Why? It's very simple. Okay? Because the more competent you are in any subject, the more you realize the nuances, the gray areas, sort of like the neutral cases in any topic, because you know more. Okay? You know more about the subject. So you're able to see the nuance. You're able to see the little details that doesn't just conclude to black and white answers. Okay? So the more you know about something, paradoxically, the more you feel like you know nothing. Okay? But there is a caveat to this illustration. You can see here, from the very bottom of this slope, it gently inclines. And why is that? Apparently, according to the research, okay, they found that as soon as you get more and more competent, that phase wherein you you're always questioning yourself, you're always doubting yourself about the extent of your own knowledge, starts to sort of go away. But it isn't instant. The Dunning-Kruger effect illustration here argues that the more competent you are about a subject, you get even more you get confident. You get as confident as you are, okay? When you're at the very okay, you're at the very lower end of the x-axis. You actually regain the confidence that you had when compared to after you knew a little bit about the subject. And I think that's very odd, but that's just my own opinion. Okay? So this is basically the overview, a short overview on the psychological phenomenon we call the Dunning-Kruger effect. Okay? And there is actually a reversal of this. Okay? Wherein it basically describes, as I said earlier, the more you know about something, the less you think you know, and the less confident you are about that certain subject. And that would just be a brief overview or introduction about the Dunning-Kruger effect. Okay? So thank you for listening.